Aloha from the beautiful big island of Hawaii. I'm Kori Gaila, holistic beauty and wellness consultant, and this is Let's Talk About Health. So last week, I want to say thank you for joining me. I'm so happy you're here again. I know if you were here with me last week, you heard me say that I thought that I had figured out my sound. But alas, I had not figured out my sound. So I had my mics all set up to my camera and I was so excited, and they weren't synced in properly. So I did spend some time with it, and I am keeping my fingers crossed that this is gonna work. We are dealing with this pandemic. So, and I'm also on an outer island. I have my tech assistants all over the place, and we have these time zones, and I have scanty internet, and there's just a plethora of challenges. So I'm persevering, and I'm pretty sure we have it down. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed on that one. So last week, if you were with me, I did mention that one of the things that I do want to start doing is having a question answer time. So I encourage you to write to me, please, at Kori@KoriGaila.com. That's Kori@KoriGaila.com with any questions, comments, feedback, any topics you'd be interested in learning more about. And if I don't have the answer myself, I can try to research that, find out, for you, get those answers to you. Also, if you have show ideas, topics that you're interested in, I can try to find, guests and bring them on and find out more information. So I really am very appreciative, and I welcome any kind of feedback or questions you may have. Also, I would love for you to visit my website. That's www.KoriGaila.com. That's KoriGaila.com. And again, I want to thank AME Studios for doing such a great job. Thank you guys. That's AMEstudios.com. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about one of my very favorite things on the planet. We are going to talk about bees, and I love bees, and I've always loved bees. And I remember being a little girl, we would go on a mission, at the beach or in the swimming pool, and we would save the bees. I think they would come in to drink a little bit of water and then fall in, and so we would rescue bees. And I just remember that as one of my childhood memories. But and then of course loving honey. And then I remember one of my best friends growing up, her mom took royal jelly. I'll talk a little bit about royal jelly, but that is a bee product. That is the queen bee food. But I thought that was so interesting, royal jelly. Wonder what that is, right? And then growing up, of course, I loved honey. That was delicious. But when I really started to understand the benefit of bee products, I was a little bit older. Again, I was working in that wonderful little juice smoothie vegetarian restaurant by the beach, and I was the smoothie girl. I made a lot of smoothies and soups and things, but one of the things that we would add to our smoothies was bee pollen, and bee pollen's an amazing product as long as you're not allergic to bees. And some people with hay fever can have a little bit of a reaction to bee pollen, but there are some practitioners that suggest, using small amounts of it, and it can actually help you build up a resistance to seasonal allergies. You do it in a little bit of like a homeopathic way, and homeopathics work similarly to how, vaccine theory, they're not vaccines, but vaccine theory, in that if you expose the body to just a small amount of that irritant, the body starts to develop its own resistance. So people who suffer from hay fever, you can, ask your practitioner about that, but you can read up on it, research it. But I have heard that some practitioners do that, where you implement, just use a little bit of this in your diet, and then you can kind of build up a little bit more of a tolerance to maybe the pollens that you might be exposed to, especially if you're getting your local bee pollen, right? Because that's going to be from all of those flowers in your local area. But bee pollen is a superfood, and I used to put about a tablespoon of it in smoothies. It was always a booster. It's considered to be like a superfood, right? But according to healthline.com, 1 tablespoon has 16 calories, 0.2 grams of fat, 1.2 grams of protein, 2.18 grams of carbohydrates, 250 types of nutrients, including vitamins and flavonoids. Also, there are 8 reported benefits on healthline.com of bee pollen as being used to help relieve inflammation. It works as an antioxidant. It is supposed to boost liver health, and that's good. Liver is our big filtration system, right? So keeping the liver healthy really keeps our systems clean. Strengthening your immune system is a reported possible benefit of using bee pollen. And so right now, it's really good that we try to boost up our immunity so that we're not susceptible to anything that we might potentially be exposed to. It is used as a dietary supplement because it is very rich in many different vitamins and nutrients that we need. It can ease the symptoms of menopause, ladies. Helps to reduce stress, which we all have our share of for sure, and it can help speed up the healing process. And so bee pollen is considered to be a superfood. You can add a little bit of it to your cereal, your yogurt, you can put it in smoothies, and it's just a really great way to get some extra little boost of nutrition. It is considered to be a significant source of vitamins, both fat and water soluble. So it contains within it a number of over, I think, 250 nutrients, but some of the main vitamins are A, E, and D, as well as B1, B2, B6, and C. Also, pantothenic, I always say that wrong, pantothenic, folic acid, and nicotinic acid. Sorry, that's just terrible, but I've always read it. I've never really heard it, and I went on the little, how to pronounce on Google right before the show. But you know what I'm trying to tell you. Also, inositol is found in bee pollen. So a lot of really necessary nutrients, and I know for vegetarians, sometimes vegans do not use any bee products because they do not want any type of animal product, and bees are living creatures, although they are not mammals. So some vegans will stay away from bee products, but if you find a very conscious bee farmer, usually bees are treated pretty well and are not harmed. I'm going to have my wonderful guest Jen on later, who is a very conscious beekeeper and quite, revolutionary in her line of work and her approach to caring for bees. She's an author. She's fantastic. So I'm excited to see her today and have her share with you. But again, so for vegetarians, all those B vitamins there, So pollen is a great source. Royal jelly, again, I mentioned that early on, but according to Medical News Today, again, it's the queen bee food. It may have antibacterial, antioxidant, and anti-inflammatory properties. It is beneficial for menopause symptoms, premenstrual syndrome. Okay, ladies, again, queen bee food, royal jelly, wound healing. And there was a study that showed that it may lower glucose levels in the body, so it may be useful for type 2 diabetes, or beneficial for type 2 diabetes. Moving on to propolis. Now, propolis is something that I use a lot. There's a salve that I like to use that combines propolis with golden seal and myrrh and some other herbs. because, again, I like surfing big waves. We have a lot of coral here. I've cut myself a number of times, and that really leaves you susceptible, especially in the tropics, to a multitude of fungi and bacterium, Staphylococcus, and some of these even like flesh-eating bacteria, which are antibiotic resistant. I mean, a lot of these bacterium and are becoming antibiotic resistant. They've learned to mutate to be able to effectively attack you and not be killed by those antibiotics. But propolis is this really wonderful product that you can get from the bees. And it was actually used in ancient Egypt to embalm the mummies. So it keeps the environment very, very sanitary, and it's in one of the salves that I use, and I'll use it topically when I cut my skin, and it seems to heal it up. But in ancient cultures, it was used for tumors, for abscesses, and really to help with wound healing. So propolis, you can also take it orally. So yeah, that's something that I like to use. Researchers have identified more than 300 compounds in propolis. Again, that antibacterial effect that it has. It's also very rich in flavonoids. And there is one study that suggests that propolis may be an effective agent in treating some forms of cancer. So of course there's more research needed on that, but that is a really amazing product if you can incorporate that into your lives. And that's exciting that there may be some use in medicine in treating some of these really awful and difficult things to treat, such as cancer and diabetes. Okay, so moving on now, bee venom is an interesting thing, and a lot of people are getting what's called like bee venom therapy, and they'll go in, they'll get multiple stings, and I know people with MS are doing this, people with arthritis are doing this, so that was interesting to me. We have not a lot, but we do have stinging insects here, and again, I'm outdoors a lot, and I've lived in farms, and I live, on an orchard, and so there's a lot of stinging creatures here. We have the centipedes, we have wasps, we have bees. And I know that at one point I was reading about, snake venom therapy. So there's a lot of research that has been done on the uses of venom, but, I didn't know that there are bee venom products where the bees supposedly are not harmed in the harvest of these venoms, but you can actually purchase bee venom. Interesting, and this just kind of came about for me recently. I looked to nature for signs of things, and one evening I was reaching behind the bed to plug in my cell phone, and I got stung, and sure enough, there was a wasp, right below my bed, and that was kind of a bummer. So I was like, ow, okay. And then probably a week later, I went for a walk, and really out of nowhere, this really aggressive wasp came at me. I almost thought it was like a hornet. It was so intense. It left a huge welt on my arm. And I was just walking, and it really aggressively kind of came at me and stung me. So that was 2. And then literally the next day, I stepped on a bee at the beach. So that was 3. And 3rd time was a charm. And I thought, okay, what's in this bee venom that maybe I might need? And, I do have some inflammatory issues that I deal with because I was an athlete for so many years. And so I did start researching it, and I did end up buying a bee venom product that was combined with glucosamine, and started taking it to see if that would be effective for my pain, because it's touted as being a very anti-inflammatory and helping with pain relief. And I don't know that I noticed a whole lot. I haven't been using it for very long, but I'm also an esthetician, right? And a beauty consultant. And so I work with the skin a lot. So then I did start researching the topical uses of bee venom. And apparently It does help to stimulate collagen and elastin. So elastin is that part of the skin that really keeps everything taut and tight, and collagen is the protein in the skin that keeps it plump and young. So I bought myself some bee venom topical face serum, and I think it looks, I think it's working a little bit. I haven't been using it that long, but I'm gonna keep using it and see. I know that it is sort of kind of a rave, in certain circles. So we will see, but bee venom, very interesting. Okay, so coming to, one thing I want to talk about, and again, I did take a beekeeping class, and my grandmother was actually a beekeeper, and I may start managing some hives for my friend's farm. I love the bees. So one thing that's concerning is this colony collapse disorder. This is kind of happening all over, right? The top researchers really are linking it to, it's a phenomenon where the bees abandon the hives, abandon the queen. The hives may be full of food, but the bees are abandoning the queen and the larva and the food. And the hive is no longer viable. And so researchers are really attributing it there's a lot of different theories. They're attributing it really to the varroa mite, which is something that is a mite that specifically attacks bees, but also new and emerging diseases such as Israeli acute paralysis, and also gut parasite Nosema. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Nosema. They may be contributing factors. So basically, the bees are being attacked by mites. There's other invaders. There's beetle. My guest is going to go deeper into that because that is her area of expertise. But then these diseases. However, when we're talking about holistic health again, which is, always what I bring it back to, we really have to look at the entire system, right? This idea of body, mind, spirit, everything being interconnected. This idea of, when we build our immune system, when I was working, with my own gardening and my own farm, which I did have a really small farm for a short time, working on that soil management, that my guest last week was talking about, really having those microbes in the soil, right? We have these nematodes, we have these other soil, factors in our soil. We want the good beneficial microbes and the good fungi, and those are actually contributing factors to the health and vitality of the plant itself, right? And then the foods that go into the soil are healthy for, allow the plant to be more vibrant, more healthy, more nutrient dense. Well, this goes the same for pollens, right? And nectars, which is what the bees are coming to collect, right? But also, using herbicides, pesticides on blossoms, on flowers, in the environment. The bees pick this up. And if it doesn't necessarily kill them directly, they're a little bit more immune compromised. Their foods are not as nutrient dense, as we were talking about last week, right? They are exposed to these different toxins that their bodies are trying to fight. And because they're a small species, they have a short lifespan. This is very, this accumulates very rapidly and can affect them more quickly than a human, right? So really when we're really looking at health and well-being, we really have to think about this idea of this immune system and how can we really build the immune system and make it very, very strong, because the stronger the immune system, the stronger the resistance to disease, right? And this goes for the plants and the animals and the insects, right? They all have their own natural defenses. And so the healthier that these specimens are, the more likely they are going to be able to fight off invasive things that may, whether it's a microbe that's invasive or whether it's an external parasite, they will have a much stronger ability to fight this off, right? So Jen is going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but although researchers are really more reporting about, say the mite or some of these diseases that the bees are seeing, we have to bring it back to this holistic idea that building this health, building this symbiosis, building this relationship, bringing in this vitality and this rich nutrition is really helping like all creatures, all the creatures that share the planet. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take a commercial break, and I will be right back after the break with our guest.
Many people are searching for answers to health challenges. There are natural solutions for a healthy and empowered lifestyle that can be delivered right to your door. Email Carol at carolbirchwell.com and type Health with Kori in the subject line to receive a free ebook on essential oils. Visit carolbirchwell.com and connect with Carol via email for your free ebook. She will help you find the natural solutions that work specifically for you.
Okay, so I'm back with my guest, Jen Rasmussen, and she is just this wonderful woman that I met on the Puna side of the island when our kids were really little. They went to this amazing, it's kind of like a farm homeschoolish thing, but it was on a permaculture farm. So really the kids got to run around wild in the forest with lots of animals and dig in the dirt, and it was pretty neat experience. I've also taken some classes with Jen, studied a little bit. She's an apiarist and an amazing beekeeper, and really kind of revolutionary in her approach to beekeeping and what she's been doing really to assist with hive collapse and issues with the bees. So I guess we'll go ahead and I'd like to have you maybe talk a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, and then we can go ahead and hear a little bit more about what you do.
All right, sounds good. Well, I started beekeeping about 10 years ago now. I used to live on a 9-acre or 12-acre permaculture farm that was devoted towards native plant restoration. And the lady that lived there, she had 2 beehives she wasn't taking care of. So she told me if I read a book, I could take care of them. So I went to the library, got some books, read them, put on a makeshift bee suit, and went out with some tools that would work for the job, and got stung a lot. And then
talk about on-the-job training.
And I think the biggest thing was that the bee stings didn't scare me away. They just made me more curious, because one hive was very aggressive, and then one hive was actually really kind. And so seeing this contrast, just like the yin and yang of life, it drew me in. I wanted to know more about them, and I wanted the honey. So that was ultimately the motivation.
Like Winnie the Pooh.
So it worked out great. My first harvest was actually like 3 5-gallon buckets of honey. And it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. And after that, I saw more and more potential. People in my neighborhood needed help with bees, and then I actually got a job at Island Princess Macadamia Nut Farm. Mm-hmm. They have 1,000 acres of mac nuts, and they need bees for pollination. So I got hired to be the on-site beekeeper, and I got them to develop top bar hives there, which is actually my start with top bar hives.
Top bar hives are?
Top bar hives are a trapezoidal shape box that you can put bees in instead of the traditional rectangular boxes that you stack. The rectangular boxes, which are called the Langstroth boxes, they have frames, and you can move the frames around and inspect them. They're a very commercial approach. I do keep them, but I have found that the topper hive is a more natural way for bees to build. They build in a way that grows like a hollow log, basically, or like they would in a wall if they moved into a house. And being that I do bee removals, I'm really fond of the wild hive thing. A lot of my bees come from these wild hives.
Oh, so they adapt well.
they adapt well and they grow on their own. They make all their own comb. I don't give them any set way to do things. They're just given one bar and they build everything on their own. And it's incredible how healthy they are because of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I know that both Jen and I were on that side of the island when we did have our volcanic eruption a couple years ago, and then I ended up relocating to the north side of the island. But you moved all your bees and ended up on the Hilo side, on the coast there, right? So that must have been intense.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the more intense experiences of my life. We had 87 beehives that were mixed between Langstroth and top bar hives that we had to evacuate starting, May 4th, when the first really big earthquake and the first outbreak in Leilani had happened. We started to prepare to move. We kind of knew like we're in that zone. It's possible, but there's a lot of hills and areas there. We didn't really see it taking our farm. So we actually had 9 hives left there and a lot of stuff when we had the last day we evacuated, and then it was the next day that lava covered our farm, all like 20 feet tall, completely covered
you guys
it.
were like, and it's so it's like it's entombed. Forget it. There's no like rebuilding.
No.
But I visited your new farm. It was amazing.
It is.
And I did, like I said, take a class with Jen over there. It was awesome. And I put all my bee garb on, and she was walking around in teeny tiny little shorts and a tank top and just brushing the bees away. And it seems like you have this very cool relationship with the bees, and they recognize you and know who you are. But one of the things that we really talk about, one of our big concerns, is the hive collapse that we're seeing and what's happening with the bees. And you kind of have an interesting take on that. You've been researching for a while. Jen's written a book, and she's taught at the university and now is teaching an online course. But maybe you can share a little bit about your take on what's kind of going on with some of the nutrients you were speaking with me, the choline and things like that. Why don't you go ahead and share?
Well, in writing my book I'm working on right now, which is Treatment-Free Hygienic Beekeeping, I did a whole section on chemicals in agriculture. And I learned things I had no idea even were important to me. Like, why didn't I learn them in health class was kind of the question I kept asking. Like, choline is it's essential nutrient for us to do every body function that is required for us. And without it, we can actually have liver issues and develop other problems in our body. And basically, like, there's a synapsis that happens when our body wants to raise our arm or use a muscle. There is acetylcholine, which is released, it's utilized. We get this acetylcholine from choline esters or esterases. And those esterases break into 2 different categories. And when utilized, they go into like helping our blood move around, helping our nerves work, our whole basic neurological function comes from this essential nutrient. So when acetylcholine is produced, cholinesterase is also produced to absorb the acetylcholine.
And these are produced by our body.
Exactly. And if the cholinesterase isn't produced to absorb or dissolve that acetylcholine, we actually can develop all kinds of unpleasant symptoms and issues that can become pretty big health concerns later on. A lot of more serious things, even like, memory loss and like some more advanced things like Parkinson's and dementia can actually be stemmed back to chemicals that are used in agriculture that are cholinesterase inhibitors. So
an esterase, anything with an A's on the end of it, is an enzyme, right? So we need these enzymes for these metabolic functions, and there's like number of different enzymes that we have in our body, and without them, certain metabolic functions can't really occur properly, right? So these are inhibiting our ability, or the pesticides themselves inhibit the ability to metabolize this choline so that you cannot uptake and use that nutrient effectively.
Exactly. And by inhibiting that cholinesterase production, it's not just us, it's honeybees and all other pollinators and animals like cows, your dog, anything out there that could possibly come in contact with food that has these chemicals in it, or the groundwater, or even the soil.
So you're talking about herbicides,
everything.
fungicides, all of that.
Yes. There's over 249 products that I researched that about 180 of would fit into the cholinesterase inhibitor category, and the rest of them are neurotoxins. So we have two categories of agricultural chemicals to work
affecting the brain, our ability.
And shutting down our ability to even think properly. And then what we're being hit with a double whammy of these cholinesterase inhibitors, which are making us unable to actually function properly. So we can't think properly and we can't function properly. What happens? Well, colony collapse disorder is like a bee way of showing us, a view at the bees, of what's happening in a grander scheme for humans.
Exactly. And I mean, they're not really an indicator species per se, but they're an insect, so they're kind of going to be very sensitive and show us, you're explaining like the lifespan of the bee, right?
Right. Well, they only live 4 to 6 weeks, and your queen can live like 1 to 4 years. But what happens in a lot of hives where we see failure, where there's a collapse, is that the queen stops laying properly. Well, the queen has to get essential nutrition in order to be able to lay properly, which means produce eggs to keep the colony going. So if she doesn't have the nutrients that she needs, the nutrition that she needs to be able to support laying 1,000 eggs a day, then that production is going to stop. You're going to start seeing a decline in the population in the hive. If the worker bees aren't getting healthy nutrition from the foods that they have available to them, which often they don't because they're put in monocrop situations. So if you have only almonds or only mac nuts or whatever one thing that they allow the bees to forage on for them to be able to harvest a crop, right? Then you end up with an imbalance in nutrition. It'd be like if we ate just avocado or just coconut.
So again, that permaculture farming, that planting lots of different flowers around, even if you were, say, a monocrop farmer, you could, around the perimeter, plant different types of flowers, right?
Absolutely.
To give the bees more opportunity to have a more diverse, I guess, diet.
Exactly.
I mean, really, it is their food, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just by planting simple things like Tulsi basil or Mexican sunflowers or like just ornamental kind of
some
crops.
little pots out.
Right. Throw some sunflower seeds on the ground. Start a sunflower field on the outside.
Sunflowers.
These are great supplements for food, for bees. Even our weeds here, like Wedelia, if people just stopped spraying them, that is a major forage for bees. And it would be a food source during times of year when there are actually dearths in other places. So it's kind of counterproductive what's happening agriculturally. It's like we're destroying the things that feed the creatures we need to keep the food production alive.
Exactly, because if we don't have the pollinators, we can't have fruit. We're not going to. If our plants are not being pollinated, like for vanilla example, I've heard has to be hand pollinated because I think there's one fly or one insect that pollinates vanilla, and if you don't have that insect, it all has to be hand pollinated. Bees are amazing because they pollinate so much of our foods, right?
Right, well, and they're nectar specific, which means that if there's a source of, say, Brazilian cherries that are all flowering in one place, they're going to those trees and they're going to pollinate as many flowers as they can, which is what we want for crop production. So it's important to diversify, but I think a lot of people are like, well, if I have too much variety, then I won't get this specific thing pollinated enough because they want to make sure there's enough crop sharing. But the truth is, if you've got 2 orange trees and 2 lemon trees, or even 1, and your bees are on, going for that thing because it's abundant, you're going to be having that in your honey, and you're also going to be having plenty of fruit on your trees. So it's kind of, there's a lot of cycles I see that people get themselves into, like whether to treat or not to treat their hives, or whether to use chemicals or not chemicals. It's like this comes down to a financial standpoint. A lot of times people are afraid to change because they don't want to lose their business or their crops or not make money. But what I found by making the change is actually that I make more money now because I don't have to buy all the other stuff. So a lot of what I make is actually profit, not going back into keeping the machine just functioning.
Right, because it's not optimally functioning.
Right.
Again, when we talked about anything holistic and just everything that I try to do in all aspects of life is coming from a holistic place. And when we're doing that holistic approach to things, we're targeting all areas. So it's definitely like a more sustainable way to function in the world, right?
Absolutely.
It becomes self-sufficient more so, right? Less that you have to intervene. And you're making a point about spraying on the roadsides. And I know that when we talked last time, Jen was mentioning there's a label and there's a warning on those herbicides and those pesticides, and they will say, don't spray on the blossoms, right? So a lot of people are not reading that information and are spraying the blossoms. The bees are getting are susceptible to these pesticides, herbicides, things that are on the plants, and that is probably a big contributing factor to hive collapse.
Absolutely. We actually see it, unfortunately, we see it in our own backyard because we are surrounded, 27 acres of land surrounding us is owned by people who spray herbicide about every 2 weeks. And so, where I used to live in Pune, we were completely surrounded by forest reserve and by organic farmers. We would see more, and then we would see like substantial die-off, where maybe somebody left out a jug that had herbicide residue on it, like they filled it up with water and left it open. That was one substantial die-off I saw while I was in Pune, because it was like a basketball-sized pile of bees under the hives. But what happens where we're at now is that we'll get into a hive that was 3/4 full, beautiful, broods awesome, the queen's laying well, you're just like, oh, this hive's doing so good. And then get in 2 weeks later, it's like they abandoned 3 of their combs. They were growing and now they're smaller. There's like half as many bees. What could have happened? And that's what made me start doing the research and really wanting to write my new book, is like figuring out, how do I help people problem solve? Because I can tell you how to deal with mites. I can tell you how to deal with small hive beetles. I can navigate through all these other bacterial things out there. But what I can't do is tell my bees where and where not to get their food.
Right.
And that's where I have a hard time as an educator telling somebody, buy these bees from me, learn from me, but I don't know what to tell you if somebody sprays herbicide in your neighborhood.
Right.
And so now I'm trying to find methods that I can actually utilize to save these hives before they're lost, which is, it's a lot because you have to be very involved. And a lot of times, once they've already brought in that poisoned nectar or pollen, wax is lipophilic, so it stores anything oil-based. And almost every one of these chemicals has an oil-based surfactant that's either fat-soluble or it's oil-based. So what that means is that as soon as the bee brings it back, puts it into the cell, the wax sucks it in. It's like a sponge. Like if you imagine putting like a sponge in water or a piece of wood in water, over time it just wicks it up more and more. And so the wax actually becomes brittle. It'll change colors. It'll kind of like take a green or red tone. If it's darker or older in age and has more of a brown color to it, it gets really brittle and spongy looking, to the point where you wouldn't want to eat anything out of it. Like you look at it, you're like, that's not healthy.
You're seeing this really just from these chemicals.
It has to be, because it's something that, like, we see the correlation. They spray, and within a week and a half, 2 weeks, our bees that we're building strong are getting smaller.
So what would you, suggest to our viewers? Really support your local organic farmers, support your local organic permaculture farmers.
Absolutely.
Read your labels, don't spray blossoms. I know that in malls sometimes, I remember being in a mall and they would have all of these beautiful like flowers, and the gardeners would spray specifically to kill the bees, right?
Right, because they don't want them to hurt somebody in the shopping center.
In the shopping center. So it just has this effect. And, last week on the show, one of the things that I was talking about was really health freedom, and where is our freedom, and where does our freedom extend into somebody else's freedom? And it sounds like there's this rippling effect, that our actions are really not only affecting our neighbors, but the bees, right?
Yeah.
And the honey production and the hives, and it's very dramatic. And so working that closely with the bees, you see the effect of this. So
Absolutely.
Really just being really very responsible in your gardening. And then of course I'm always for voting, with my dollar. And so I do, and have for a really long time, pretty much 100% organic since since I can remember, since I was a teenager, right? So,
That's great.
Just eat, a little bit less, maybe pay a little bit more, but I really talk about supply and demand. And it seems like the more we really get behind the movement of organic farms and permaculture, price can reflect that. The more demand, the more supply, usually things go down in price a bit.
Right.
So then moving into what you're doing now. So you're writing a book right now. You have an online course. So your online course is for people who would be interested in beekeeping?
Yes, and it's actually several parts to the course. So you start out with an introduction to beekeeping based on ecology of the beehive, which many people think it's just bees in there, but there's actually like 30 plus other insects that share that home with them. And so
there's a whole like
ecosystem that's happening
city,
all the time.
a little insect city happening.
Absolutely. And that problem with treating and using chemicals in a hive is that we throw off the balance in there, which is why we end up with these tougher pests that become so aggressive.
They might be more resistant,
exactly.
And the bees are a little more delicate, right?
And that's actually what is part of the collapse that you asked about, is this varroa issue, because so many people do use the chemicals in these hives that they just keep getting more and more virulent.
It makes sense,
yes.
I see.
So a lot of what I teach about is biology and ecology, and helping to understand how to take care of bees based on what their needs are, because that's the ultimate thing that's important to us. Isn't what we need to get from them, it's what do they need from us.
Exactly. And especially because we have this symbiotic relationship with them. Really, we're sharing. They're sharing their food with us, honestly, right?
Yeah.
And then we become their caretakers because we have this little beautiful synergistic arrangement. And I guess it really is our responsibility to make sure that we're providing for them the best way that we can and keeping them healthy and happy and productive and
absolutely,
yeah, giving them a safe space to live in.
Right.
So wonderful. So if our viewers are interested in any of your products, I mean, you have honey products. I think you have all kinds of. You have pollen. You have.
We do. We offer a wide range of products like honey and bee bread and beeswax, and we also sell bees, treatment-free honeybees on the Big Island, and mated. We do natural cell queens that are mated as well. And just to kind of finish up about the course, it's not just about the ecology and biology, but it gets into like pest management, how to deal with pests, understand them, beekeeping history in Hawaii, and then the other parts of it are based on like actual application, like how to take care of the hives. And the more advanced portion is like swarm catching, how to grow your apiary, make products from what you can get from your beehive.
Awesome. That's so great. Awesome. And I know that Jen was mentioning to me, it is, a Hawaii-based course, but it would be applicable to anyone who's a beekeeper aside from wintering for bees, because we don't get much of a winter here.
No.
Maybe way up on top of Mauna Kea, but not too bad. So if our viewers are interested in finding out more, it's paradisenectar.com. Is that right?
That's correct.
So paradisenectar.com. Look up my good friend Jen. It's a family-owned farm. You're supporting a family business. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you being here. And keep up the good work. Keep the bees happy and healthy.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha.
Visit KoriGaila.com and schedule your wellness consultation to receive a custom-designed, scientifically sound behavior action plan that is holistically based. Browse the website and enjoy free articles and valuable health and beauty information. Receive your free holistic skincare ebook. KoriGaila.com.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. I'm so happy that we had you. I look forward to hearing from you. Again, please feel free to write in Kori at KoriGaila.com. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy. Aloha.
Many people are searching for answers to health challenges. There are natural solutions for a healthy and empowered lifestyle that can be delivered right to your door. Email Carol at carolbirchwell.com and type Health with Kori in the subject line to receive a free ebook on essential oils. Visit carolbirchwell.com and connect with Carol via email for your free ebook. She will help you find the natural solutions that work specifically for you.
Visit KoriGaila.com and schedule your wellness consultation to receive a custom-designed, scientifically sound behavior action plan that is holistically based. Browse the website and enjoy free articles and valuable health and beauty information. Receive your free holistic skincare ebook, KoriGaila.com.